Okay, Lisa.
Okay. The David. Adonai ori v'ishi, mimi ira. Adonai ma'oz kaya, mimi echad. Vikrov alai mere'im le'echol et basarai. Zarai ve'oivai li. Im achashalu v'nafalu. Im tachane alai machane. Lo ira libi. Im takum alai milchama. Bezot ani voteach. Achat she'alti me'et Adonai ota avekesh. Shivti b'vet Adonai kol yemei chaya. Lachazot b'noam Adonai levaker b'heichalo. Ki yitzpeneni b'sukkot b'yom ra'ah. Yastireni b'seter oholo. B'tzur yeromameni. V'ata yarum roshi al oivai sevivotai. Ve'ezbecha ve'oholo. Zavche teruah. Ashira va'azamra l'Adonai. Shema Adonai koli ekra. V'chaneni v'aneni. V'cha amer libi b'kshuf fanai. Et panecha Adonai avakesh. Al taster panecha mimeni. Al tat ba'af abdecha. Azrati hayita. Al titsheni va'al ta'azveni. Elohe yishi. Ki avi v'imi azavuni. Adonai ya'asveni. Horeni Adonai derachecha. Uncheni v'orach mishur lema'an shurai. Al titneni benefesh zarai. Ki kamuvi ede sheker va'yifeach hamas. Lule he amanti lirot betuv Adonai be'eretz chayim. Kaveh el Adonai. Chazak ve'ya'ametz libecha ve'kaveh el Adonai.
Thank you, Lisa. Beautiful reading.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to go into Chavruta for at least 30 minutes. And everyone got sent the Fisher. And I guess the rabbi was asking us to study the Fisher and not to forget not to forget the Levi that we looked at before. So.
And we should also welcome back our intern Yael Werber, who will be in one of the Havruta groups. So is everyone ready?
I think so. Everyone, Cole Goodstein says she can't do that, but everybody else is ready.
It takes me a long time to really get through, recognizing the vowels and, just stick to it. You will get there. Everybody who's just beginning with this, you really will.
Okay, Sherry and Simon have their hand up, and then Ben Shaffron.
Well, I'm actually raising my hand for Lisa Brown, who's going to speak for our group. Lisa?
Oh, okay, thank you. So we had a wonderful discussion. It was Sherry and Simon and myself and Sarah Sloan and Sarah Siegel. So it was a big group.
Wow.
And it was very interesting because we had very different, Sarah and I are more comfortable, Sarah Sloan particularly, who I think is fluent in Hebrew. We were really looking at the Hebrew and we were contrasting that with the English translations and with Sherry and Simon's and Sarah Siegel's resonance with the English translation. And it was very, very interesting, the different takes on the Hebrew and the English. And I'm trying to think of what they were. Sherry, what was one of them? Why don't you jump in?
Yeah, so one had to do with secure and one had to do with fortress. We were talking about being judged by our actions and rock as refuge and security. In terms of the Hebrew, we were talking about the word for security and yeshuot and the word for fortress, those three.
Right, the word for strength comes up a lot, which gets different translations as fortress, but it's place of strength. And Bitichon, which Sarah Sloan pointed out, really means security, and it gets translated here a lot as trust. But it also means security, right? To trust in God, but also to be secure in God.
Ben Shaffron?
I hope we were together with Dim and Marilyn Greenberg and Dorina, and we started with the Fisher, and then we got stuck on the unzen-like quality in this particular piece that he wrote, bring vengeance on the enemies. And the discussion went from there into human nature and the belief in a supreme being or an inner feeling for the supreme being, and that human beings have really not changed over the generations, and all those feelings and expectations are really the same today as they were then when this was written. It generated a discussion more about divinity and humanity than about the particular words of the psalm.
Lori Spear, you're next.
Yes, I was in a group with Jeremy and Dean, and we didn't read it in Hebrew, but we did take turns reading the Levi and then the Fisher stanza by stanza and comparing the two. And definitely the more dramatic, theatrical tone of the Levi and the quieter, gentler tone of Fisher. We were taken with some of the poetic strengths of Fisher, particularly at the beginning, you have hear my voice reaching outward, and then towards the end you have gratitude to you who are the hearing of my outreaching words. And that's as far as we got. We never got to the end, but I think we went pretty deeply going back and forth between the English version, the two English versions. Jeremy, Dean, do you want to add to that?
I think you covered it. Thank you.
Okay, on to the next.
Linda Solomon?
Well, I was with you, Joan and Jack, and we had Jeffrey Rogers there as well. And it was a very interesting discussion, mostly about what's going on now. We compared the writer and the people that the writer was speaking about to what is going on now in our lives and how we feel about those people who refuse to be vaccinated and those people who refuse to wear masks. And our conversation primarily was about that and how we compared them to the evil people in the psalm and the speaker in the psalm who's doing all the right things. And I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in, that's fine with me. Jack or Jeffrey or you, Joan.
Just seemed that the writer, you know, it reminded me of the of 26, where the writer, sorry, you know, was very like, I'm doing all the right things. Please punish those horrible, wicked people. They're doing all the wrong things. They're not following the path. And, you know, it's very frustrating. I think what we were talking about is the frustration of the writer with why can't the wicked people just hear the message and do the right thing? And so, you know, he's lifting up his hands and like, notice me, I'm trying my best, and punish the other people. I don't think you should say that though. We didn't agree with like, don't point a finger and say like punish those horrible people. But I don't think that's a good message. But you know, anyway, anybody else want to jump in?
If I could say something about our group, we were talking about the Fisher.
Jeremy,
What?
we're kind of taking turns with raising hands, but I can put you after Chazan Hirsch.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Okay, Chazan Hirsch, you're next, and then Jeremy.
Good morning, everyone. So I had the pleasure of studying with Susan Stein in New Jersey and Robin Bosla in Connecticut, and I'm in Pennsylvania. So we were encircling New York, and we read the Levy, and Robin brought up interesting topic about hands and how many times it talks about hands, the work of our hands, raise your hands, and God being personified also by Fisher with having the work of God's hands. And we had an interesting discussion about what it meant to raise our hands in prayer. Where are we raising them to, and how, in meditating, sometimes you have instructions to move your hands up, down in certain positions, and how we don't have that. So that was really a surprise benefit of the conversation. And I pointed out that in verse 9 of the traditional translation, we have a song that's sung as part of the Sukkot liturgy, Hoshia et Amecha, Hoshia et Amecha, Uvarech et Nachalatecha, etc. So that's we agree that that's a really beautiful verse for Sukkot and generosity and beneficence and nurturing. And then we actually read the Bernstein as well, and she is far more vengeful, and she talks about payback time. So that led us into a discussion about vengeance and whether we liked the psalm or not, and whether it seemed balanced to us. And for me, my own nechemta, my own sort of consolation, my way of restoring myself was to point out in verse 6, there's actually a prayer in this psalm. Baruch Adonai ki shama kol tachanunai. Blessed is Adonai who has heard the dirge, the plea I sound out to you. And I thought that maybe if we view that outpouring more as a prayer to God for help, rather than let's go out and incite violence and tear the people down and give them their just deserts, it was a little easier for me to take. And last point, just that was translated by Fisher as gratitude to you who are the hearing of my outreaching words. And I thought that was a very beautiful phrase. Isn't that what we say to our friends? Thanks so much for listening to me when I needed to be heard. Gratitude to you who are the hearing of my outreaching words. Over and out.
Okay, 10:46, but we'll keep going for a little bit for anybody that wants to stay a few minutes longer. Jeremy?
No, let other people report.
Well, Jeremy, you're the person with your hand up and nobody else is. It's your turn.
Jeremy, you're on mute. You're on mute.
In the Fisher, as opposed to the Levy, the translation is about the people who are not listening to God. Let them fall down, let them not build up, as if by not listening or not caring about the work of God's hands or of your hands, whatever the your is, they will fall down and they will not build up of their own making. The powers outside of that don't have to do anything. They'll just fall down and they won't build because they're not reaching.
If Jeremy's done, Judy Hollander.
Yeah, I'm not going to, a lot of the things, one of the things that we talked about that was different from other people are saying, we're looking at this line 5. This is really getting into the weeds, not the general stuff, which we did too. But in line 5 or verse 5 in using Levi's and looking at the Hebrew, it changes person. They do not pay attention to the work of Adonai as third person now, and then talks about the doing of your hands becomes second person. It was just curious, and that plays around. An artistic thing. I don't think it's a big theological thing, but it struck me. And I studied with Sarah Sill and Sarah Goldley. And Goldley was on the telephone, so it was a little harder for her. And it's easy to, because she's not waving her hand. So we might have given her a short shrift. So we apologize.
Betsy?
So I studied with Marianne and Adria, and I won't repeat some of the themes. I find it interesting. We all saw this Fisher so differently than how he usually is. But I just wanted to add, we also spent time talking about the struggle that we continue to have with some of this language of what the Psalms are about, that even after 2 years, I just wanted to raise that even after 2 years almost or a year and a half of studying together, that that these words and some of this theologically is just not necessarily easy, that it takes real effort and time of really trying to pull this apart. And personally, it's one of the things why I love when we break into Havruta, because it makes that process so much more expansive.
Lisa?
Hi, I'm not sure if we're running out of time or not. I think we are, but I'm noticing one really key difference between the Fisher and the original Psalm. And both Sherry and Simon, I think, were pointing out that it's really difficult to catch the phrasing of this. And he really changes a lot. So in the original Hebrew is that don't be deaf, because if you're deaf, ... And then there's another command to you. Hear the sound of my supplications, right? Hear me, because if you don't hear me, then blah, 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 right? And so it's this it's a series of requests, commands of God, followed by explanations of what's going to happen, right? If those things aren't followed. That's right in the original Hebrew, more or less. I'm oversimplifying here for time, but Fisher really does not do that at all, right? I call out, don't turn not heeding, because if you're silent, I will be, hear my voice when it cries for you, when I lift up my hand towards your holiness. I mean, it's a very different format that, he really, and I think in some key ways, reformats this psalm, Fisher. That was oversimplified.
Okay, I put myself in line just to talk about the lifting of hands, because even though it's not the same word as in the psalm, there's a blessing about lifting hands that that's part, that gets said. When I was hanging around with more observant people, we said it a lot. Chazan Hirsch, do you know the one that I mean? Could you say something more?
I think you might mean hand washing, in which the prayer doesn't say actually to wash the hands. It says al nitilat yadayim.
Yes.
And the word nitilat, which I believe comes from the verb linatel, but I'm not 100% sure about that, so don't quote me, has to do with lifting, or some people say waving. And it's the same word that's used at Sukkot when we say al nitilat lulav, which is usually translated as the waving of the lulav. We're saying the same thing, and people who observe this, Joan, they would be washing their hands before every meal, or on Erev Shabbat, they would be having Kiddush, and then they would go to wash their hands, and then without any words between hand washing and making the motzi over the challah or whatever one is making motzi over. And that's why sometimes people sing at that point, particularly if you're in a communal setting and there's a lot of people who have to wash their hands, because the tradition is you don't break up the progression from the blessings to the act of you're washing your hands in preparation for eating. You need to say the blessing. You don't want to break it up with speaking. But no one said anything about singing with no words.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to reference, and I just didn't have the access path in my brain wasn't working. So thank you so much.
We all need someone there when the access brain isn't access of our brain that isn't working.
Yeah, it's so much nicer to if that help is community than than the little computer in the pocket.
And the other thing that I had spoken about in my group, and I have not researched this, these are just thoughts, is the lifting of the hands by the Kohen Hagadol, by the priests, by the Kohanim to bless us. And even that you'll see mostly in European cemeteries, I haven't seen it as much here, but sometimes you see the hands on the tombstones to say that someone was a Kohen.
Right, which got picked up by a Jewish actor in science fiction stories.
Yeah, did.
I think it was Leonard Nimoy brought that into Star Trek.
Yep. Yeah. UD is saying there's a lot. No, the Levi, Sarah, is the hand. They will have a pitcher to show that they poured the water to serve the Kohanim. So there is another symbol, but the Kohanim are definitely the hands.
Okay. Well,
it's interesting. One could write. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go on. No, good. You'll finish. At some point, we have to stop because Tasha has to do something else.
I think it would probably, I know it would make a really fascinating thesis, doctoral dissertation. I bet someone has written one on hands in Judaism and the different, the connotations of lifting one's hands, placing one's hands. I mean, that's what samicha is when people become rabbis and cantors, there's hands placed on their heads or their shoulders or whatever. There's the laying on of hands. I mean, we have a lot of hands in our tradition.
That sounds like it would be a very interesting book to read, that dissertation.
Well, we're looking for writers. Thanks, John, for leading and keeping order and providing us with that beautiful, beautiful setting, which I just want to dive into.
Oh, well, because on Hirsch, it's my backyard. So anytime you can get yourself up to the Boston area, I will be happy to help put you into a canoe or kayak as you choose, and you can go out there.
Don't forget you said that. I won't.
And that applies to everybody who just heard me say that.
I can't wait, Joan. My daughter lives in Alston, so I will take you up on it.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah.
Terrific. The sooner the better.
Okay, my friends, I have a meeting. So
I
wish you all Shabbat Shalom, and I'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.